Well, g'day everyone. It is the Two Ordinary Cops, and we're back again. Now, mate, I'm going to hand over Damo, ask how you were, but we've had some sad news today, mate. Do you want to break it in?
Yeah, so mate, we're going to air tonight. Well, we're recording this. It's not going to be out for a little while because we sort of like to stay a little bit ahead. But as we go to air tonight, there's an active police operation happening in Victoria. So obviously, by the time this is out, that will all have been resolved. The information that we've got is no more than the information that anyone else in Australia who watches the news has got, and that's the two police officers at this stage are confirmed deceased, and a further one has been injured and shot in the leg, I believe. Um, and as a result, at the moment in Port Punker in northeast Victoria, there's an ongoing police operation at this stage with all hands on deck. So you've got special operations group out there, all your locals and lots of specialists out of Melbourne up there dealing with that right now. So obviously, something in the media that's been mentioned is there's sort of throwbacks to William Biller. Um, I think this one's a little bit more complex in that they don't know where the offenders are. So we're not gonna try and think we know what's going on. We don't at this point, but our thoughts are there. Once again, it guts me every time I hear this stuff because I know people just like these people. I don't know the specific people involved, but certainly we all know people who have been to these jobs 1,000 times as we have, and once again, this has happened. So we'll probably mention it more down the track, but at this stage, I think we just acknowledge that that's occurred. But another thing that I really want to emphasise that I've noticed at the moment from the new Chief Commissioner, Mike Bush, down in Victoria, who was the previous Commissioner of the New Zealand Police, is outstanding leadership early on. He's in the public domain. He's out there speaking about what he can speak about. Given the fact it's an ongoing operation, he's very limited in what he can say, but he's showing excellent leadership, and he's doing what I wish all commissioned officers would do when they speak to the media, and that's be human, get the information across, explain why you can't say certain things. Look, we can't speak about that right now. It's not appropriate. It's an ongoing operation. It'll form part of the investigation. The whole idea of the investigation is to work out what happened. He's just humanising it brilliantly, and he's very impressive. So the two parts, there's a tragedy in Victoria tonight, but yeah, there's some really good leadership at the top. So there's not much more we can say. I mean, you guys have your say there, but it's we don't know anymore. There's nothing more to know yet. So
No, that's right. And look, it's important to basically, what you see in the media. It's you trust about half of it, because they do jump to their own conclusions at times. But and we'll just wait until we hear some of the facts and get it right. But our thoughts and our hearts go out to the policing family, because
mm.
it's horrible news. But mate, I might actually just pass over. We've got a guest speaker on tonight, Luke from WA. Mate, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe your thoughts on what's happening down in Victoria at the moment?
Yeah, g'day guys. My name's Luke McCulloch. I'm a former police officer over in Wapol here. From 2 years ago, I left the job after a 15 years service. Look, yeah, obviously a horrible, horrible tragedy that's occurred, and thoughts are with all the rest of the VicPol team and families and loved ones of those who have sadly passed away today. Um, I think what you guys are doing in terms of this podcast and humanising policing and describing what it is actually like, and as you said, Barb's turning us into humans, I think is awesome, and something that some of those listeners may not understand and realise is just how connected we all are from different states and territories. For example, one of you are in Queensland, one of you in New South, you're policed in Tassie, and I'm in WA. Um, where I stand with that is I'm still forming part of the police football team over in WA here, and we've got heaps of brothers and sisters that are in the Victorian police football team. I don't know a lot about this incident. I know as much as you guys would, probably even less. I've just gotten home from work, but it's scary to think that may be some friends that I've played footy with over the last 15 years during those police footy trips, and it definitely shakes the whole of the nation when something like this happens, not just that state, that's for sure.
Mm.
And look, it is refreshing to hear that our commissioned officers, particularly over there, like you said, Barb's again, are showing that leadership, which is nice. That's for sure. I haven't heard those speeches yet, but yeah, it's refreshing.
Yeah, no, it was pretty impressive early on, mate. I will correct you there. You said we policed in Tassie. I got drunk in Tassie. I certainly
Sorry,
did.
Northern
Policed in
Territory, Northern
Territory.
Territory.
Northern Territory. Yeah.
Sorry,
It was,
mate.
I tell
That's
you
right.
what, it was the hottest Tasmania I've ever been to, my friend. Yeah.
Well, the only time I've been there, it snowed on me while I was playing footy. So
Oh, yeah.
we've had the opposite effect.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, that's all good. It's Freudian slip, and guess what? Me and Schultzy are more than capable of that, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, obviously we've lightened
Apologies.
it up a bit, but we're talking about a tragedy there. We'll move on because we don't have any more information about it. But yeah, our thoughts there, and obviously in the weeks to come, we'll talk about that a little bit more once more information comes out. But yeah, Luke, mate, it's excellent to have you on tonight. And just a bit of background there. I think the beauty of it is you've now been out a couple of years and released one book and looking to release another, and a little bit of a different specialised unit, something that we've sort of not spoken about, and certainly not me, because I think before we went on air, I spoke about the fact that there are bricks around that swim better than me, and both you and Schultzy diving. So
Yeah.
do you want to sort of go through your career, mate? Just let us know sort of what you did and how you ended up doing that specialised role that you're in, and what you're up to now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I joined the police over here in WA straight from high school. Whether you think that's too early or not, I'll probably look back now and I think it was a little bit. From 17 joining as a young cadet. Back then, the age here to become sworn was 19. The year I joined was the year they dropped it down to 18. Looking back, it was awesome that I got to go through as an 18-year-old, as the youngest copper in WA at that stage when I went through the academy that had ever been sworn. But probably needed to go through a little bit of life experience, that's for sure. Looking back now, I would have loved to have gotten a trade or something. But look, it is what it is, and I had a great time. I only spent 9 months as a cadet. I still reckon that was the hardest point in my career, to be honest. Pushing paper around and dealing with all the other shit. I think on my 18th birthday, I was at gang crime actually, and I got duct taped to a chair, put in an elevator, and sent up to the inspector's floor in the middle of our main policing precinct. So that was the start of an awesome career. My dad was a cop and still is, funnily enough, and my mum was a cop when I was born as well. So it was definitely bred into me. Not that they wanted me to become a cop when I first applied, but I then turned 18, went through the academy, bounced around the western suburbs for a little while. So I went to a place called Wembley, Leederville, Subiaco, Scarborough, all relatively pretty mundane and easy stations, to be honest. If I'm being true, met a partner at the time, and we headed up to South Hedland. So we went to South Hedland for 3.5, 4-ish years. I had an absolute ball up there. That was really good, fun policing, especially being used to metro policing and then going bush and being a lot more relaxed, a lot more, I say, common sense used as opposed to doing everything by the book. You just got done. You got stuff done. And you got it done well, and you got it done efficiently as a result of it. Great team that we had, and we had an awesome time up there. But as probably a lot of specialist people will attest to, I'd been in the job at that point for about 7 years, and I wanted to just be really good at one thing. I was mediocre at general duties. I was never a brilliant investigator or anything. I got in amongst it all, but I felt like one of those what's that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. And that, I think, is the epitome of general duties. I take my hat off to everyone who is general duties now, because they just can handle anything. And I'll talk about that later in terms of transferable skills and whatnot. So I wanted to get really good at something. I tried my hand out at TRG, so a tactical response group. I tried that way too young, trained poorly when I was in South Hedland, didn't go anywhere with that one. But the dive unit came up, so a dive squad, and I was always comfortable in the water. I'd never actually dived before, so that was kind of a shock to the unit when I applied and said I hadn't dived. They said that a prerequisite was you had to at least have your paddy ticket, you had to have dived before. And in South Headland, you guys know WA a little bit in terms of where Exmouth is from there.
Yep.
So worked out that the only place in the Pilbara that actually offered a paddy ticket was in Exmouth. Pretty glorious place to go and do your first dive, that's for sure. So I headed there the weekend before the selection course. It was the only course that I could do. Got there on a Thursday night. Friday dived all day. Saturday dived all day. Wanted to get home at least to be able to get the flight on Sunday. So drove home straight from Saturday night into the morning of Sunday. Flew back down to Perth, and then by Monday morning I was on the selection course. Did the selection course. I think my benefit, or the thing that was in my favour within the selection course, was I actually hadn't done much diving yet, which at the time I didn't realise. So we started off night one. It was a live-in component. You did 5 days live-in where they just basically beasted you. And I remember night one, the dive sergeant got around the table, and there was 15, 20 of us, I think it was at that point. And he goes, right, I'm not telling you to suck eggs, but I want you to go around the table, tell us your diving experience and why you want to join. And I remember I was on his left, and there was a big circle of people, and I was like, don't go left, don't go left, don't go left. And he went right, luckily. So he turned right, and the first guy jumped up and he goes, I've done 600 dives, I've dived all over the world, and I've done 3 years of policing, and I think general duties just isn't for me, so I want to specialise. And I thought to myself, hang on, I've done 7 years of policing, and now I think I've got the right to go specialist. What about 3 years? What are you talking about? But anyway, I shit myself, to be honest, because I thought, oh, God, this guy's trumped me straight away with all the diving he's done. And I went around the room, and there was a common sort of pattern that I noticed. It was, one, everyone had dived a shitload more than me, and I was well in under my head. But two, everyone was really, really junior in the job. I think the next to me was maybe 6 years. I was next to the most senior there. I think there was one other 9-ish, 10-ish year person. But everyone was sort of 3 years under. And I remember thinking, like, geez, if general duties isn't for you and you're sick of it after, the 2 to 4 year mark, maybe this job isn't for you. But that was another subject anyway. We went through the 5 days, and I luckily got through that part, got pushed onto the next section, which was a 3-week course where we learnt how to actually dive. And that's where I think the benefit of not having any bad habits came into my favour. So I was able to learn everything and just absorb everything that they taught me straight away. I ended up getting ranked first on that course, and then I got the next selection spot after that, which was awesome. So I got to come home from South Headland and go straight into a specialist role, which I spent the next 8 years at, basically. And then that took me into my book at the end of the career, essentially.
Yeah. No, definitely. So I think you've covered off on the policing, and that's you mentioned South Headland. You really enjoyed that more remote sort of regional policing. What was it? You said you had a lot of fun down there. What was it about that you really enjoyed down there?
Community was the biggest thing. I'm a social person, definitely an extrovert. Much to my wife's dismay, she's an introvert, so that's what we match. Look, I'm an extrovert. I love getting in and around it. The footy was my favourite. So work aside, work was good fun, and I had a good crew. But the footy, I remember as the best years of my life in football. That's for sure. I joined in with the local footy team, and that actually helped my workout, believe it or not. So playing with all the locals and just gaining a bit of footy respect on the field. You're the local copper. You're going to cop a blow every now and then when the ball's 15 metres away. And I think I just wore that, and I wore it well. If I found out that someone did that, they'd be the first person I'd go and buy a beer for at the end. They'd shit themselves, but I think they respected that a little bit. And I found myself going to out-of-control gatherings and parties, and the locals would just be like, hey, that's that Ruckman. Yep, everyone cool it. It's all good. He's here. Happy days. And done. It would just shut down for me. Whereas some others that didn't really gain that respect by getting involved with the community had a little bit more drama. But the outback, well, not outback, I suppose, but just that rural community side of it, and going out and exploring things that, to travel from Perth to go up and see, it'll take you 16 hours to get there to start with. to get to that base of South Headland, and then venturing out 2 or 3, 4 hours, each way. I had the opinion that while I was there, I was going to go out and do as much exploring as I could. But then going to even more remote centres and stations like Marble Bar and stuff like that, to work out how they work and to use the community to your advantage and on your side, was just awesome. It was just a massive tick in the box to be able to get that. I don't know. That was like a kicker to appreciate that the town was backing you at the time and you had a good relationship with them. You obviously guys know what I mean in that regard. It's hard to explain, but it was.
We're both sitting here nodding. It's just like,
Yeah.
we get it. We totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of hearing you say that is that it just means that for one, it gives us, we all say this, it's correct. It's, that's our experience. I think that's why, lots of people say that that's exactly it, because it's just the normal experience of the job that we do out in the bush. But WA is such a massive place. It's just monstrous.
Yeah.
And it's my experience in WA, I mentioned it before, but in Kununurra, we'd go across and do cross-border operations in Kununurra.
Yeah.
And I thought the territory was hot. Oh, my God. Kununurra, it was like I fell out of the fire and it fell out of the very, very hot frying pan into the bloody blast furnace that was underneath it. It was just... And look, very similar up there in the north. It's very similar policing, also with a lot of that mining. So there's a lot of money thrown in there as well, but admittedly FIFO, a lot of it. But sort of very similar in a number of ways. But man, WA does big on a whole different level. It's bigger than anything else in Australia. Western Australia is just massive.
Yeah. Oh, mate, even just if I was to add up the hours of driving and stuff, just going from South Headland back to home, I would have done that back in the day in a day. Wake up 4 a.m. and I'd be home, catching up with my parents at 8, 9 o'clock at night, kind of thing, and that's driving straight the entire way. It was only actually the last year of my career as a diver where I could officially say that I had driven from the top of WA and connected all the roads up and finally made it to the bottom, reaching into South Australia from different just rural jobs around the area. So it took me 15 years to do that. The police force paid for it and they got me around doing different jobs, but it took me that long to actually achieve all of that. And I don't think there's many people that'd be able to say they could do actually that this day and age.
No. It's actually just made me think, Damo. I used to drive, 700 kilometres just to have a beer.
Yeah.
It's going to be cold.
But you did it so well, Schultzy. Yeah. No, it's what I love is there's always these commonalities, especially for people, especially coppers who've worked out in the bush. And that sort of segues into another little section that I'll talk about. So there would have been a lot of coppers who have only worked in Perth, real metropolitan policing, and then gone for that specialist role. Do you want to tell us how that working out in those regional areas and even going to those remote communities, did you do any relief out remote communities and stuff like that?
Yeah, like I said, Marble Bar. I went out there to help out because that was a 2-man station back in the day. So going out there just to relieve the one up when someone would go on holidays. There was another Newman would go and assist out for major events, but that was a bigger station as well. But Marble Bar was the main one that I went to.
Yeah. So what I find is that when you've worked in those really small communities and you're absolutely absorbed, I find that makes you much better when you go into a big metropolitan specialised role. Like I've mentioned previously, obviously doing crime work and property crime stuff in Darwin, but also the negotiator role.
Yep.
I found that having worked in communities, and Schultzy obviously did a lot of time in communities, it just makes you able to, I think it improves your ability to relate to people a bit more. Like I'm certainly not knocking people who've worked in metropolitan areas because it's gritty, it's tough, it's job to job to job, but it's really good to do that once you've had that exposure out in the remote areas. And I think what I'm moving towards is, do you think that helped you when you got into that specialised dive role?
Yes, yeah. Like in terms of being able to work with different parts of the community, different stakeholders and all that kind of stuff, 100%. Because, in the divers, we were a team of 8 that covered the entire state. Now, you say the state of WA was big. Well, it's pretty big for a team of 8, that's for sure. And when any sort of, search and rescue needs to occur in any waterway, that's not just coastal, that's any sort of dams or lakes or rivers or anything like that. We're called and we need to send a team. and our team is a minimum of 4 for an actual op. So having that experience up in that Pilbara, Kimberley region, dealing with the local Indigenous, there was people in my team that had never gone past the 26 parallel, for example. So when we would go up to, say, Kununurra to go for a dive, South Headland, out in the middle of Roebourne for waterways or floodways and stuff like that, when we got there as a team, to be able to just walk into it quite comfortably and deal with that community and deal with the different cultures and the different sort of problems that would come and arise from that, I found that easier. It was just walking in, and it was just like riding a bike. Whereas, some members of my team, I remember walking them through a community, and they were just thinking, "Holy shit!" And looking at kids walking around in the community, going like, "We can't. That's not allowed." Like, what are you talking? And I was like, "Mate, they're comfy. They're happy. They're cruising. They've worked out the meaning of life, and they're cruising at the moment."
Yeah.
So definitely in that regard, and to be able to problem solve. Out in regional areas, you don't have every resource at your fingertips. You learn how to problem solve. Coppers in general, don't get me wrong, and as you said, I'm not taking anything away from Metro Coppers, because quite frankly, it's a job that I wouldn't do anymore, because it's that much of a pain in the ass, and it's actually a specialised role, to be honest, to be able to deal with the people in the city nowadays. But to be able to deal with no resources, no backup, no what we call VKI, you guys call VKM, I think.
Yeah.
They're not at your disposal to be able to get any other sort of unit there. Things like boats, or to be able to get an engine or a dive cylinder filled up and stuff. We had to go and just work that out ourselves within the community. So being aware of what a small community is like and how to treat them with respect, and not just roll in and go, "I want this done now," definitely helped. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's actually, yeah. I mean, it's very important. One thing, I mean, you mentioned stakeholders. Just liaising with them constantly out in the bush does build that rapport, and it also helps you, like you said, once you get in a specialised role, you know who to contact out in those remote communities to be able to get a job done. And Damon and I have spoken 100 times about the amount of support we've had in those remote communities when you're there doing a big job. So, mate, surely you've got some good stories from your diving time that you can share with us.
Yeah, where do I start? So when I got into the dive squad, I was the youngest there. Obviously new, and it's the same as any sort of unit, I suppose. You get in, you're the new guy, you're doing all the shit jobs to start with, the maintenance and the monitoring of all the equipment and the assets and whatnot. So I did that very early on, and I took that on really well, and I enjoyed that and liked it. I got sent over to New South very early in the piece to go do what we do, a commercial diving quals. Is that what you've got, Schultzy? Have you got a commercial qual with your
Mate,
what you used to do?
basically open water,
Yeah, okay.
and the hooker, because we dived hooker.
Right.
A lot.
So a recreational version of that, essentially. So we
Yeah.
get sent in to do what we call part 1 and a part 2 course. Part 1 is 30 meters on the scuba. Part 2 is 30 meters on surface supply. So with the big helmets and whatnot. So I did that and then came back, and I got back, and I think it was within 3 to 4 months, I reckon it was. I don't know if you'd ever heard of it, but I was sitting at base back then, a little bit more relaxed with what you could and couldn't do. I remember it was a Saturday. The sergeant at the time was going down to go watch his son play soccer. Water Police wasn't exactly the busiest place in the world. You went down the river, you waved at a few people, you got a coffee at the local yacht club, and then you were pretty much back just chilling out for the day. So I won't take anything away from that. But he disappeared. I was manning the fort. We had a radio operator because we had our own radio channel. And I remember sitting there, and I just hear a knock on the door, or the window, sorry. Now, we were on a secure wharf that no one should be able to get onto. I mean, it's a wharf, you can climb onto it, but you shouldn't be allowed onto it. And I remember looking at the window, and there's this just average punter, and I came out the door. Luckily, I was kitted up, because I was actually, at this point, I was like, who the hell is this? I opened the door up and said, "Hey, mate, what are you doing? This is a secure wharf." And he goes, "Mate, we've just found a body in a suitcase."
Wow.
I went, "What?" Now, I don't know if you have heard of that story. There was a small Asian lady that was essentially crammed into a suitcase in the Swan River and dumped there. Now, I've just gone, yeah, whatever. That does not happen in WA. Okay, at best, maybe in Australia that might happen in Victoria or something like that. In Melbourne, heart of Melbourne, with all the gangs and stuff, but not here. So I walk down the end of the wharf. He's panicking and freaking out, and I look into his dinghy, and I genuinely thought that at this point, him and who I now saw another mate were about to pull me into the boat. So I actually had my hand on my Glock at this point because I didn't trust him. And I looked over and there was this suitcase, and fair dinkum, there was a foot hanging out of the damn thing. And I just remember going, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So I didn't know what to do at the time. I grabbed their driver's licenses and I was like, please stay here. I had no radio on me. And I only just listened to your radio podcast, and I was thinking I felt fucking naked at the time.
Yeah.
Nail on the head when you explained that one. I was like, I have no comms, and I'm 40 meters away from my radio operator.
Yeah.
So I
and you're about to abandon a crime scene to get
exactly. And I potentially had the crooks as well. But anyway,
good point.
Yeah. So I left. I sprinted upstairs. The radio operator was there. I grabbed a handheld, and I said, mate, someone's just rocked up with a suitcase. It's got a body in it. All I can see a foot. Call everyone, and I'm going back down there. And that was it. And I sprinted down. I got him on the radio when I got to the bottom, and he goes, are you serious? And I said, yes, call everyone. Call my sergeant back, tell him to get here, call detectives, tell forensics. We need the whole kit and caboodle. I'm gonna get these guys out of the vessel, and I'm sitting them down, and I'll start getting details off them. Long story short, it turned out that that was a domestic relationship. The bloke knocked the Sheila off, folded her up into a suitcase, and dumped her off the side of what we call the Fremantle Traffic Bridge. Put her in the suitcase with a bunch of tiles from a renovation job, but didn't zip it up properly. The tiles have slowly leaked out, and as that's happened, she's bobbed along and eventually popped up, and these two fishermen have found her, just floating on the surface. So that was my introduction within the first 6 months at Water Police. And then not long after that, because at that point it was kind of like, Macca's here, and he's definitely a bit of a shit magnet straight away.
You're one of them too, are you, mate?
Yeah. Oh, shit, yeah.
Bloody hell. Why do I even attract shit magnets?
Shit magnet.
Yeah. Yep.
No, definitely. I got my first. It usually took anywhere from 8 to 12 months for a diver to find their first body underwater. Don't get me wrong, it's not something that we all hunt and look for, but it was kind of like you definitely compared it. It made light heart of finding them underwater. And I remember the guy who had told me about getting into the dive squad, he had initially brought it to my attention. He had lasted like 3 or 4 years, and he just hadn't gotten one. And everyone was starting to bag him out, saying like, mate, when you find him, you must just be leaving him off to the side and just ignoring him kind of thing. You're not doing your job. And I found one within a couple of months, and he got a bit shitty about that. So I got that. And then I got the Australia Day plane crash as well within the first year. So we had the Australia Day, it wasn't the Red Bull. It was like a water landing demonstration on Riverside Drive there. Bloody hot day. The guy couldn't land. A vessel had moved across the bank where he was going to actually skim along the water and come back up. But then because he had to bail and then bank around real quickly, it was too hot and he didn't get enough thrust, and essentially it just nosedived straight into the water. And me and my partner were the first on scene, jumping in with them with a dive set on, trying to pull the people out of there, thinking that they might have had some sort of an air pocket or something like that. But unfortunately, both deceased. But yeah, at that point, it was a year in, and I'd had 2 major jobs that happened once every 10 years. So straight away, don't get me wrong, I was a shit magnet, and they labelled it rightly so.
Rightly so, all right, bloody hell.
Yeah.
And I might just add, we make light of this because that's how you deal with it. Everyone gets it. Yeah. People have been listening to us long enough. This is a pretty good conversation. It's like, we don't know you, mate. We met you 5 minutes ago, 20 half an hour ago.
Yep.
It's just, this is how police interact. This is with the shared purpose, the shared experience is there. So straight away, when you say things like that, and this is more for the listeners, we get you. I completely understand what you're saying.
And you have to, don't you? Because otherwise, like if you start taking it on too much, and this is this is what initiated us connecting up, and we'll probably get to that later on. But you hit it on the head when you had that comment to say where it's not your trauma. You can't take it on as yours. If we did, we'd all bloody last a month in the job. Like there's just too much of it. I saw a really interesting quote the other day to say that an average person in their life will go through 2 or 3 major traumatic incidences. Coppers go through 800 in a career, plus more. So if you took it on too seriously and didn't make light hard of it, not to the expense of the victims or the families, obviously, but you just wouldn't survive. I don't think anyone would.
No, you make a good point, mate. Yeah. Sorry, Schultzy, you go. Yep.
Yeah, mate. There's actually a couple of things. When you actually mentioned about like your experience in diving when you first went into it, it just brought up a memory. When I first actually got my diving qualifications, I had far more dives under my belt by probably 1,000 than my instructor, because we were all doing it. We basically got taught by people that a bit like the grandfather clause. So we all, I mean, we all got trained pretty well. But if you actually look at some of the times we were doing, and this will probably freak you out, we were doing an hour and a half at 20 meters in the morning, and an hour and a half at 20 meters in the afternoon. So
doing any deco at all, or
a little bit. But I thought you might get blown away by that because I know definitely under government it's a lot stricter.
It's so safe. It's not funny. You couldn't. You'd struggle to stuff it up. Trust me. But it means that's the only standard I know to dive to now. So yeah, you're right. When I hear stuff like that, I'm like, Jesus, I can't do that. But
It's interesting as a layperson listening, because I've dived when I've dropped a bloody rock in the pool 2 meters down and picked it up and gone back up again. So that's my experience in diving and swimming in general. But
you know what though, Bubs? You say that, and in all honesty, a diver in the police force doesn't need to be good at diving. You need to be able to sink, because all we're doing is searching mud at the bottom anyway.
Yeah.
So you might have been perfect for it, mate.
Good. Well, I'm bloody big enough to do it. I'd sink pretty well. I'll give you the drum. I'd probably be the perfect police diver. Not much good at taking tourists out, but I might be pretty good at dropping to the bottom and squirming through the mud. And I guarantee I'm bloody good at finding bodies, so I reckon I'd be pretty good at it, actually.
There you go.
But it's funny. I look back with having no experience in diving whatsoever, but I do understand decompression, and I understand deco means decompression. I sort of picked that up. Took me a second, but anyway. Just understanding how serious, the bends is and decompression sickness can be. And I've spoken to Schultzy plenty of times about this, and I saw your reaction then, because unlike the podcast, I can see you. And it's funny when Schultzy says, yeah, we did this with us. I said, mate, you should be dead. You should be dead.
That's what the instructor said. They actually got doctors involved and was wondering why a lot of the people in that fishing industry weren't dead, because they should be. And apparently they basically summed it up that we were dive fit, because we didn't do that straight off the bat. We broke into that length of time, and our body just got fit at getting rid of nitrogen, quicker. So it didn't mean that some people did get bent, and some people were doing longer than what I was doing.
And they probably weren't even aware that they were bent. It was just niggling little injuries or itchiness here and there, and they just pass it off probably, when really, you're putting yourself in at risk, and you're making yourself more susceptible to it as well. So
definitely, yeah. So it's just one of those things.
No, it's definitely so. Obviously, that's early on. I mean, within very short period of time in your dive career in WA dive team, you've dealt with 2 major incidents that were national news, basically. So, how did you go? Just talk us through your career in diving and how that over time sort of took its toll.
Yeah, look, I was very, very lucky in terms of, and I think I stem this all the way back from even my childhood. I think a lot of coppers who can do longevity, and this is just my opinion, I think a lot of coppers that can do real longevity and not absorb a lot of that trauma, and have it just compact and compact and compact are generally people who have had a really relatively okay childhood. I think I had a blessed childhood. My mum and dad, fucking awesome. They're the best people in the world. They're still together now. I've got an awesome brother and sister. Nothing huge happened to me when I was growing up. Stable household, no issues there. The odd, grandparent or something that would pass away, as everyone has, but nothing bad happened. And as a result, I was only speaking to a mate the other day, because I was explaining it as a boring childhood, but he was like, "Yeah, but man, that made you so well adapt to then take on other people's issues and problem solve and help them out." So I definitely had been set up for success with that, in terms of not having my own shit to deal with. So when that kind of stuff came along, I didn't find it bad. My way of dealing with finding countless bodies, and quite frankly, I lost count of the amount of bodies that I obviously had to find underwater. Um, my way of dealing with that personally, everyone within the squad that I used to speak to all had their own different little ways and means, but mine was that I would always treat the body as an object,
Yep.
trying not to dehumanize them or talk ill of them. But quite frankly, that if I knew their name, if I knew anything about them or personally were attracted to their profile or their family even, I wouldn't search properly, or I would search too risky because I'd be too attached to it at that stage. So I found it was just easy to go, where do you want me to search? There, cool. And you want me to find something? Okay, cool. It's a human body. All right, I'll go find that. All right, their name is no. I don't want to know their name. And quite frankly, I'd get to some scenes, and we'd have investigators and general duties going like, now you're looking for a 14-year-old male person. They're wearing X, Y, and I was like, mate, do you think I'm going to ignore the person in the green coat as opposed to the red coat? Like,
Yeah.
I don't really need to know what they're wearing. Quite frankly, I don't even want to know their age, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a human body. I'm not going to be able to see it. Let's face it, 98% of our job, we couldn't see a hand in front of our face.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab it. I'm going to come to the surface, and I'm palming it off to you guys who are dealing with the investigation. I'm going in after, I'm cleaning myself off, and I'm going to get deconned. It's something that we needed to do, I think, anyway. It was the way I approached it. In saying that though, I think I am a perfect little, what's the best way to explain it? Like a soup pot for something later on in life, in terms of possibly waking up with nightmares and all that kind of stuff, and triggers and whatnot. There's definitely triggers now that go off, and that's that minor case of PTSD that I have no doubt happens in every single copper that leaves the job, especially something that I've done from such a young age, and boiling it all together and whether I've dealt with it right or not. But at the moment, really good in terms of the way that I dealt with each job individually. I had a phenomenal network around me. My partner, or my wife now, she's amazing to bat ideas off and bat stories off and whatnot, even though what I tell her is probably 10 to 15% of what actually occurred. My dad is amazing. He's still a copper, so I can really work off him as well. His best friend, my uncle, is a cop as well, still with him in the same job. They graduated together. So the network around me, the way I approached each job, definitely. And it's interesting, the way I say how I don't want to know their names. The one job that ever did affect me, because we're not all superhuman, there was definitely one job that I can remember specifically that ever sort of really touched down and hit me hard. That one was a young male, 8 years of age, I think it was. But I dealt with a kid before, but this one, I knew his name. And it was a long, drawn-out process. It went for over, I think it was a week. So I was frustrated by the end of it. We knew where he was. We just couldn't get to him. But knowing his name, having the family around, feeling like they were judging us and we weren't able to achieve the mission of what we wanted to do and get him out quickly, that was the one that affected me the most. And I suppose that was more frustration, but I definitely put it down to knowing a name. A name gives a person a body, a soul, and all that kind of stuff. So that was how I approached it anyway. Yeah.
I think, sorry, no, mate. It's also, I think part of it is the emotion of the family.
Yeah.
as well. That you start to we're very good at disassociating ourselves with the trauma. However, when you hear it a lot, it just I think it affects it does
Yeah.
everybody always sits there and goes, oh, look at the cop, they've got a stone face, they don't care. Yeah, they do inside,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
we've got to you know departmentalize, I suppose, and we're there to do a job, and
Yep.
we're there to shut out the emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Definitely.
it was. It's funny when you said he used to hand it over. Look, I had one job where the divers got a fella out of a waterhole down in Alice Springs, but I was the detective on the other end who had to do everything. I had to put the coronial investigation together. I was the one who consulted with the family, all the rest of it, took the body away to the bloody mortuary. And I completely agree. If there was the ability to just go, that's exactly how they should do it. And that's exactly how those specialist units that I dealt with did it. The dive squad in the NT is a part-time unit.
Yep.
They get called upon when required because you said you didn't have much work in WA, mate. We had very minimal work in the NT. But we still needed it, and I think the only complicating factor in the Northern Territory, especially only the top end, is the bloody crocodile factor.
yeah,
I've
So
got a funny story about that. Okay, keep
yeah,
going.
no, well, I want to hear it. But
yeah, so
anyway,
do
very good.
I.
It's funny how diving. Once again, I know nothing about diving. I know that diving means going underwater, which I'm good at. I can sink really well, but that's it. Doesn't mean I can live, but I can do that. So a very good mate of mine who's still in the job, quite high ranking now. He was in the dive team. I think he might still be. I'm not sure. He was the one who found the body of a bloke I was looking for in Alice. It was a drowning in one of the rock holes,
Yep.
and he he said it did freak him out when he found him because it was amazing how you mentioned you couldn't see your hand in front of the face. He said that the only time he could see his hand is if he put his finger on his goggles. He could see his finger. The
Yep.
water was
Yep.
nothing. He said there was zero light and there was zero visibility. Not you couldn't see much. There was zero. It was like wearing a blindfold. So he said the only way you could do it was by basically crawling along a rope they'd pre-positioned on the bottom of the ground. And you would know all about this. I'm just going what he told me. And
Yeah.
he said that's how you knew. That's how you knew your search grid. He said they'd put a rope roughly where it should be, and they
Yep.
would go along the rope and feel. And he knew
Yeah.
that he had about a 60, 70 centimeters patch covered.
Yep.
Anyway, what
Yep.
he said was his hands hadn't touched this person. It just so happened his hands had gone out wide and he'd moved forward and he bumped face to face into the head of the body. And he said he smelt it a split second before he bumped it. And he said he never thought he'd be able to smell a decomposing human underwater, but he could. And he explained that to me. And I think he was a little bit rattled by that because he expects to be able to feel a body and then goes, hey, it's a body. We're going to recover a body. No worries. We hand it over. We decontaminate and that's us done. And then Barb gets to bag it and take it back to the mortuary. Well, yeah, but he had to recover it. And they weren't that deep. It's only sort of 4 or 5 meters, but they were still
Yeah.
right down on the bottom. And he said he had a moment where he had to control his breathing because it was a very unexpected thing and he never expected to smell it first.
Yeah.
Which, mate, I excuse my extreme ignorance, but I've never found a human body underwater. So, but yeah, that was one thing. Have you got anything to add to that, just from your expertise?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first off, I've had the luxury, like your mate, of unfortunately, headbutting a body that I was finding underwater, and like I've done some freaky shit up in South Headland that's put me on edge before. I've done some diving, obviously finding some precarious positions to be in and to be finding bodies and whatnot. But there is nothing that's ever spiked me and my adrenaline as much as that. So I completely agree with what he was saying there. And it is a moment or two where you may have been able to tell topside on comms to say, hey, I've found someone. There is a moment or two where you just have to stop. And I reckon it probably took me 15, 20 seconds to just grab the body, realize what you've just done and go, holy fuck, and then bring everything down. Because otherwise, you start essentially hyperventilating. And I don't care how many bodies you find underwater, there's nothing that's ever going to prep you for that. I found that from day one of the dive squad till year 8. There was never a change in that regard. I don't care what anyone says. Other thing that I was going to mention about it was, yes, it is pitch black and it's mesmerizing to a point, but then so disorientating with how dark it is. But being trained in it and doing it for so long, you fine tune other senses, which make it this weird, phenomenal sort of feeling, whereby because you've got no sight, you've got no sound apart from your own breathing. It's kind of like that theory of when someone is blind, their hearing goes up. Um, well, I found that and this is one thing that I try and describe in my book. I'm no English literature, so I try to describe it as best as possible. But if you've got no sight and you've got no sound, your touch goes through the roof. So much so that I remember when we were training, we had golf balls thrown into a local lake. Now, that local lake was, I reckon, a metre deep. And you've got to think like 90% of dive work within the police force is it's something like the stats say it's under 4 meters, because it's all just shallow crap. It's not real deep stuff, that's for sure. But I remember skimming along the floor, and I was on what we call a lifeline, hanging onto this line, and I was sort of arcing around. And what would happen is you'd get to one side of the arc, they'd let an extra bit of meter out, or 2 meters, or whatever you were searching for, and it was a predetermined distance, and then you'd come back and do the other arc. Anyway, I was looking for these golf balls. It was a training run, and you just belly to the ground, scouring, swiping your arm up and down, moving forward, swipe your arm up and down. And I remember everything in my body stopped when my shin felt something. And I had wetsuit on, so I had a 2 mil wetsuit on, but my shin still felt something that was man-made. It wasn't natural. Everything else I'd come across so far that was on my stomach, my neck, my feet, my hands, my arms, everything was a stick or a twig or a rock or something like that. The minute my shin went over this golf ball, my whole body just froze. And I specifically remember that moment going like, holy shit, I found it. And I've run my hand down my body, back down my leg, put it where my shin felt it, and I'd found this freaking golf ball with my shin, of all things. And it proved to me that, when everything else gets blocked out, those senses just get heightened unbelievably. So yeah, it was a very strange feeling, but once you honed that in, it made it amazing in terms of finding things. Like I went into a pool once that was black. The pool was just completely, disregarded and left for the last couple of years, and there was a bloke that sadly had committed suicide next to it. Well, it was believed that he'd committed suicide. So the detectives called us out. He was found next to the pool, wrists both slashed, and the body was dealt with and whatnot. But the detectives wanted us there to ensure that it wasn't like a murder or anything like that. So they've said, hey, can you search this and try and find a knife of some sort? Now, I'd searched that thing, and on the base of it was probably, I'd say, a centimetre worth of just thick, built-up leaves, like gum leaves. Mm. Searching the bottom of it, did the whole thing. Obviously, didn't take too long, but I didn't know what I was searching for. We assumed a knife. And I was on the way back, going up and down the stairs just in case, because he was found near the staircase. And on the last step, I put my hand on the step and I breezed over all of the leaves, and bang, my hand stopped again because I'd felt something. And it was a Stanley blade that I'd felt in this thick leaf sort of litter that my hand just picked up through a needle stick glove as well, mind you. Mm. But I couldn't believe that I'd found it. I pulled it up, and the detective just jumped for joy. I was like, thank you. Now we don't have to make it a suspicious file or anything. We can write that one off. Again, not at the expense of the victim, but it just showed that, the way that we search and how it does work. Yeah.
And that's just fascinating to me, because it's just so foreign. It's so foreign. It's still policing, but it's something that I've never given thought to, except for that one experience with my mate down in Alice. That was, and I mean, the whole dive team in Alice, but when they weren't from Alice, they'd flown down and they'd been pulled from all over the territory to come down. But it was just something I'd never thought of. And then, normally for us, it happened to be a body this time, but you do a lot of evidence collection too, yeah?
Yeah, like I said, anything that is subsurface, that any jurisdiction or any investigative role wants it searched or looked for, we get the call in. So you've got drug importation as well on the bottom of shipping containers and hulls and stuff like that. We'll go and look at sea chests and parasitic devices that are magneted on the bottom. to weapons and discarded evidence that may be involved in a crime, and then obviously the search for deceased bodies as well. So yeah, anything and everything. Cars that get dumped, we're the ones that will go in to hook the tow chain up to skull drag it out. So yeah.
Yeah. So that and you mentioned the interstate as well. Do you want to talk about the interoperability between the different jurisdictions?
Yep. So, and that'll take me to that funny story I remember actually.
That's good.
So, look, Australia-wide, there is obviously pockets of dive units in and around each state. New South Wales are top of the pyramid in that regard for Australia. They are the duck's nuts in that regard. That's who I went and did my courses with. So they're actually an accredited commercial diving school as well. They only do coppers though. So I went there. They're just second to none. They're amazing, those guys. And they have an only dive unit, whereas we have a part-time dive unit in the water police. So we're all water patrol officers. And then when the dive job comes up, we switch hats over and we go over to that. Next to them would be Victoria. That's also another school. So I went over there and did my my supervisor's course there. They're awesome, and they're a bit separated from water police, but a little bit closer than New South. And then you've got Queensland, who have an actual unit, but it's a very minimal unit. But then they've got part-timers spread around the state. So their sort of their way that they would go about a job, if it's still the same, is they would send 2 of the full-timers and they would take on 2 part-timers that are in the location of where they're going to. Very similar to negotiators, because I did a little bit of that towards the end of my career as well. Tassie have minimal numbers, and South Australia as well, and then you've got Northern Territory. The funny story that I was going to talk about was when I was on my commercial course in New South, there was a couple of Queenslanders that were on that, and I got quite friendly and quite chummy with them. But being a young, innocent, naive sort of fella, I went there and I was the youngest in the school. And I was talking to a couple of Queenslanders, and I remembered speaking to them and talking about Crocs and going like, so what's your fucking deal with Crocs, guys? Like, and how do you go through a riverbank if there's believed to be Crocs in there, especially salties? And one of them goes, all right, young fella, so what we do is we'll have a section of the river where we think this person or evidence or something is in, and we'll rope it off. So we'll put a net on both sides. And we'll have a croc watcher sit up on the tree, and they'll monitor that for 24 to 48 hours or whatever it was. And I went, oh, okay, cool. And he goes, and at the end of that time, if they've obviously netted a croc, they'll start that whole process again. But let's say they don't net a croc, the dive team will finally roll in, and then just before they get into the water, they'll throw a flashbang in the water. Okay, so that just wakes anything up that's been sitting there. If there's a croc and it comes out and it gets netted, cool, we've got to start the whole process again. But if nothing happens, the divers go in. And they'll have a time frame, and that'll be prescribed according to, what crocs have been seen here last. And it was a real believable story at this point, right? And I'm just hooked.
I'm sitting there going, fuck that.
Well, at this stage, I was like, all right, cool, yeah. And then the last step, they said, was when they throw the flashy in, nothing happens. The nets stay there, but they have a Sierra up in the tree. And for listeners who don't know that, like a sniper. And I was like, so you got a sniper there. Is that obviously because, I had a little bit of an understanding of crocs. I was like, so big crocs further away, if they hear the flashbang, they're going to come in and be a bit inquisitive. And, I'm assuming the Sierra's there for them. And he goes, nah, mate, the Sierra's for you if you get done by a croc. And I just,
pretty good. Yeah. The croc watch thing, that's a real thing, because I've got a magnificent picture. I don't have it. I've seen a magnificent picture of my mate Andrew Duggan, who we've mentioned on this before, was one of the connies at Owen Pelly in the top end. And everyone knows Cahill's Crossing. It's the picture of our 200 cops. It's Cahill's.
Yep.
So anyway, a vehicle needed to be towed off to Cahill's Crossing. And there's a great photograph of Duggo up to his neck in water, ducked down, trying to hook up a tow rope to a vehicle to be recovered. And there's 2 National Parks rangers up on top, armed to the teeth over the top. And Duggo reckons he was in the water for just as long as he had to be and not a microsecond longer. I was like, mate, you can shove that job directly where it's not going to be found again. So
Yeah.
That is their territory, and we have no say or business in being in that area. Like, I'll dive with sharks any day of the week, but crocs, get fucked. Yeah, I'm done with that.
Mate,
yeah,
it's pretty funny actually. We
Unofficial.
used to, of course, up in Torres Straits, we used to run into crocs quite a bit. Like, I never ran into one underwater. However, we used to dive around Mount Adolphus, which is a croc breeding ground. So we were diving along the edge of the reef, and there's crocs sunbaking on the beach. There was hundreds of them there. But a lot of people, a lot of divers I spoke to that actually run into them underwater, and the crocs freak out and they swim
really?
away. Yeah, so there's a theory they don't take people underwater; they take people on top of the water. Because they always freak out when they go underwater.
No,
Yep, still wouldn't do it.
Don't care.
Nah.
You blokes do your diving. Watch your crocodiles. I'll be at the bar. No, I don't mean.
I have dived with freshies, but not salties. No, I'm not going to go within a kilometre of them. Fuck that.
No.
And actually, just one other story when you talk about headbutting bodies, I almost headbutted I was just diving along looking for crayfish, and it was very strong current, so it was very murky water. I was down about 20 meters. I could probably see about a foot, if that. And anyway, I was going down current. What I didn't realize, coming up current was a hammerhead. So I actually ran into a hammerhead underwater.
And they're pretty vicious. I heard.
Yeah. So anyway, I think actually both of us freaked out because it freaked out. It didn't realize I was there, and I didn't realize it was there, and we just took it. I never saw it again.
Well, I heard they hate bubbles.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, if you're breathing out, obviously they would have. I've heard anyway. I wouldn't want to test it, but I heard they fit themselves in those bubbles. So you get all these freaky, crazy, like recce divers and stuff that actually go and look for these, and they have to take rebreathers because otherwise they freak them out.
And see, and hammerheads are actually very vicious. Funnily enough, tiger sharks are one of the most placid.
Yeah.
Like they're
just territorial.
Everybody thinks they're the real danger, but they're actually very, very calm sharks most of the time. Hammerheads will go absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of
Damo's just like
you can shovel this shit up your ass. Give me an active armed defender every day of the week. No. At least I can shoot that prick.
Yeah.
There's too much water and there's too much shit I can't talk to. Not interested. No. I'm a landlubber. Where's my Hilux? Where's my escape route? I can't run to a car and drive like an idiot to get away. Sorry, I'm not going. I've got my skill sets. That's not one of them.
We all got the skills.
I'll give you. It's very interesting, but I'm just sitting there going, "Oh shit, no, that's not me."
Yeah,
I appreciate it's not for everyone. That's for sure.
No,
yeah, that's for
mate,
sure.
It's I love it. What I've loved is that like we literally started talking to you half an hour before we started recording, and or not even. And you and Schultzy, it's funny because you've got 2 points of commonality. Like you're talking about policing and the commonality there, and then you blokes have just rolled into diving. Well, I don't know about diving, but I can appreciate it. I'm sitting there going, they're just catching up. This is great.
Yeah.
To combine the two, we might have just created lifelong friends, Schultzy.
Well, definitely, mate. Yeah, we'd love to have a sit down, have a beer with you one time, mate. But that's not over the internet. That's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Well, always got a bar here at the back of my yard if you guys are over, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's bloody good. But look, obviously we're not finished with you yet, mate. Just bear with us.
Can I crack another Guinness?
Yeah,
you can
go for
crack
it.
as many as you like, mate. Yeah, that's the go.
That's right.
No, you're right. So I think the beauty of this is, Schultzy, is what we're going to do. Well, just while he's off at the bar, he's back. Holy shit, look at the fridge. The listeners can't see this, but he's got a well-organised
situation. Look at that.
My God.
That's impressive. Damo, I think we need to do a road trip.
For those playing along at home, Luke's sitting in his home bar, and he's just showed us the fridge at the back, and it's extremely impressive. So he's got a patch. We've got to go, I think, but yeah. Obviously, mate, now you mentioned that you've done 15 years in the police force. You've got out, done police diving for 8 years. Very specialist role, like an extremely specialised role within policing. It's like a specialisation within a specialisation, being water police and then diving within that. So it's a very niche organisation. The number of police divers in Australia, you could probably fit in your bar. So
Yes, yep, I can.
obviously,
Yeah,
there's a very small number of people that do this. So that's why it's a really interesting thing for me, because I've been on the receiving end of your product once, but obviously it's something that happens a lot, and a lot of the jobs are obviously very, very full on. They're very big jobs. Often there's a lot of media attention around it. Now, you've spoken about your transition out and the fact that you've written a book. Do you just want to go into that for us a little bit, mate? And what sort of inspired you to, once you left, to write about your experiences?
yeah. So to start with, I actually started writing that while I was in the job. I only ever published it when I got out, though, because of, well, and not afraid to say it, just the red tape that I would have had to have, passed through and stuff like that. So, which I'll talk about in a second, how I got through all that. But it essentially stemmed from, I was in about year 6.5, 7 of the dive squad. It was actually just before COVID hit, so end of 2019, start of 2020. We'd had a pretty full-on Christmas time and New Year's Eve. We had a couple of bodies. There was a major murder that had occurred in a place called Belmont down here. And then New Year's Eve started. We finished up. Sorry, New Year's Eve had been, and on the 1st of January, I think it was, we got a call to say we're heading to Geraldton for another missing person, which was a diver off the coast in Geraldton. So went up there. We searched around for this diver, and whilst we were halfway through that job, the next day we got a call to say down in Esperance there was a missing person off the rocks of Esperance. Now, for those who are listening, Esperance, beautiful, beautiful part of WA. The stuff of postcards, mind you, it's only that for about 2 months of the year. Everything else is cold and windy, but when it is nice, it is just heaven there. So we had to start heading in that direction. We didn't know how we were going to get there. We were tossing up between, because we've got a dive truck and we drove to Geraldton. We were tossing up whether or not we could continue this job. We weren't having much luck. The info and the intel to suggest for the second job down in Esperance was a little bit more concrete, so we would have a better success rate. We didn't want to leave that for too long, and the weather was good. One of those 2 months of the year. Were we going to drive the truck straight down? That was going to be something like a 12-hour, 13-hour drive. Were we going to leave the truck, fly there with police air wing, but then we wouldn't have kit, and that was all up in the air. Anyway, we stayed one more night in Geraldton. The next morning, couldn't believe it, the body that we were searching for came ashore. It just floated along shore. So that was that job done and dusted. We then made the decision to drive to Perth, leave the dive truck there, take minimal amount of equipment, which meant we had to, degas all our cylinders and bleed everything, pack that in the plane and head down to Esperance. So already at this point, I've told my missus at the time, missus who now is my wife, hey, going away for 2 nights, and this has turned into 3-4 nights. We've gone down to Esperance. We've conducted that search for that body, and we weren't successful in that one either, unfortunately. It had been there, I think it was 24 to 48 hours at that stage. For those who don't know Esperance as well, a lot of big fish down there with grey suits on and big teeth. So there was that possibility. We did our best. We searched the area in accordance with the intel that we had. We would love to search the whole world, but you just don't have the time and the resources, unfortunately. So you've got to search what parameters you've got. You've got to be realistic about it. We finished. Had a night in town at the local pub with all the local volunteer marine rescues, local coppers and stuff like that. It was a good debrief. And then headed onto a plane the next day, headed back to Perth, and then we were midway on the way back to Perth when we got told to do a U-turn in the air and come straight back to Esperance because now there had been a shark attack on a diver. So like, Jesus, we've been away for about 4 or 5 days at this stage. Still, we've already reversed our underwear, we've turned it inside out, and we've gotten the most out of what we can do with it. We've headed back to Esperance. We're straight out to the scene, tried to find this person now. Weren't successful in that. Found a bit of equipment over the next 2 or 3 days when we were searching. We've got ROVs down there. that spiked a massive, big political argument as to whether or not we were allowed to dive, shark attack, and that all obviously stemmed from it that my poor sergeant at the time had to deal with. I don't envy his job in that regard. And to the credit of our district office as well, they don't have any info and they don't know diving like we do, and they're not aware that Bruce the shark isn't going to have a feed and then wait there for the next person. They're probably going to keep moving on. And the fact of the matter is, it's the same risk as every time we get in the ocean any other time, but it just looks bad, and I can appreciate that. So we were very stop-starty with diving. We packed up in the end after those 3 days, and we finally thought we were going to be heading back to Perth. But as we were packing up, the first body in Esperance had floated to the surface, a little bit away from where the initial scene was. And callers were saying that now there were 2 shadows circling it in the water. So we're dealing with more sharks. So we hightail it there to the beach where that body was. And then there's a horrible scene there where obviously there was a body on the surface. There's 2 sharks that were basically, young great whites, and they were having a crack at the body. We had to pull this body into the boat whilst they were essentially having a crack at it. We managed to successfully do that. There's quite an intense chapter in the book that's describing that for us. And then we got one more call at the end of that night saying that in Denmark, another person had been diving around a reef system, and they thought that they'd found what they believed to be human remains. So we had another job to go to there. And at that point, our boss had gone, "No, you're not getting any more calls. I'm going to send a driver down to come pick you up. Turn your phones off, turn the radios off. You need to come home. It's been 10 days. So it was actually there on the way home that I started thinking, this has been a fucking interesting week, to say the least. I had also, during it, I had missed my sister's engagement party as well, and she wasn't actually going to have an engagement party. I'd given her grief enough to go, mate, you need to do an engagement party. Like, how can you not have an engagement party? It's a celebration. Like, let's do it. And then I didn't go to it. And I remember that really affected me. And I write about that a lot in the book, because it was just that typical, and you guys would probably attest to this, that typical mindset of, I'm the only one that can do it. I need to go. The job won't get done otherwise. And you always put, whether you liked it or not, you put the job first at times. And it was a big realization for me to go, fuck that. There's always someone else will do it. You're just a number at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, the job will still be there. Family comes first. And it was a big realization in my life that I made at that point, because I was really disappointed in myself that I'd said no. Well, I said, I have to go to this job. There's no one else that can do it. And I was just lying to myself at the end of the day and lying to my family. So that was a big one for me. Wrote about it. What I'd realized at the time, well, now I realize, was the first chapter. I'd finished from leaving to getting back to Perth just on my mobile, started typing it out. And then I went, oh, shit, this is actually going somewhere. Now, very quickly, let's also remember that I was a dumbass at English in high school, okay? I passed high school in year 12 with 51%, which is 1% over what I actually needed to pass school. There was no chance in hell that I was ever going to be a literary genius or anything like that. But I'm good at telling a yarn, as you two probably are as well, obviously. It just needed a lot of editing. So I started writing more. I took notes on what the 10 days was and what I wanted to hit on it all. And then it took me about 2 years from then just to go on different camping trips with my missus, bring the laptop out and just start plugging away, essentially. I thought it was going to be a manuscript that I'd hand to family and leave it at that. But my lovely wife surprised me in 2023, I think, Christmas, where she actually had hand-bounded a copy for me. So she printed it out, taught herself how to hand-bound a copy of the book. And she, from there, made about 5 copies to hand out to friends and family and whatnot, which was awesome. But don't ever read one of those copies because it's horribly written now that I read it back. That then started the conversation of like, are you going to publish this, mate? Like all my friends and family were going like, this is a really interesting story. And part of me just thought, yeah, it's because you're my friend or you're my family member and you find it interesting, but it's not going to go anywhere. Like, why would I bother doing that? And I didn't want to deal with the policing side of things and getting it approved because, yes, by now I had left the police, but I was on a year's career break, what they call here, where I was still technically sworn. So still, to their dispense. And if something had gone up, they could call on me and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, no, I don't want to deal with that. I waited till I officially resigned, and then I just started randomly throwing the manuscript out to different publishers on Google. I had a really good company called In-House Publishing in Queensland that got back to me, and they essentially said, "Mate, we like what you do and what you've done. We are a self-publishing company, though, which essentially means you fund it. They'll print it. They'll give you a lot of guidance in terms of the way that it's written, editing. If you want that, I'd gone off and done that on my own. The front cover, they put it on Amazon for you, so it's on Amazon now and on Kindle. And they helped me, and they just made it simple. Whereas a lot of other book companies that I went through, and this might be the copper in me and the distrusting version of me, but they just seemed real grey. And if you pay us this much, we just take this much out of the percentage and X, Y, Z. It all didn't sit right with me, and I didn't trust anyone. Whereas this company was like, you pay X, you make 100% of the profit, and that's that. We print it for you essentially. So there was no risk to them, all the risk to me, and I was willing to take that on. So went through that. My wife and I got married, and then I actually had my first draft copy of it on our wedding day. It rocked up to our front door. So I naturally took it. Hey?
That's an omen.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah.
So we went on a very quick, short mini honeymoon as soon as the wedding was done down south on a camping trip, and I took it with me. And Maddie, my wife, was like, "Do you want to go live with it? Do you want to see what we can do in terms of like pre-orders and stuff?" Because at this stage, I was ordering 100 copies because the next quantity was 250 or 500, and I was never going to sell more than 100 copies. So I went, "Yeah, all right, cool. We'll go live with it." So on our honeymoon, we went live with it on a website that she'd made and designed. And within 24 hours, and this just proves the network around me that I have, and the policing network nationally as well, divers nationally, I'd sold 104 copies within 24 hours, and I hadn't even put the order in yet. So that blew me away. So immediately I bought the 250 copies, had that on the way from Queensland over to Perth, and within a week I'd sold all of them. The 250 were gone, so I ordered another 250. I've still got some of that second 250 now because I've definitely exhausted my own network now. But now it's turning into awesome things in terms of author talks at local libraries, local men's health talk companies and organisations. Because at the end of it, I do talk about that dive job that I did with the young 8-year-old, and how that sort of broke me down a little bit. I didn't go out and do it myself. It took my wife and my dad to say to me, "Hey, look, something's not quite right. You probably should go and have a chat with someone." And I went and did that. So I talk about that, and just the fact that it's okay to not be okay. And now it's gone on to Amazon. So nationally and internationally, it started getting purchased on that as well. It just keeps steamrolling and snowballing, which has just been an awesome experience, and one that I never ever expected. I think I'm up to 450 copies now, I think, sold.
Wow.
2 are on the way to you guys, so you'll get them soon. They should be there very soon.
Yeah, they got posted the other day, Damo.
Yeah, beauty. No, it's really good.
But yeah, and now it's even inspired me to write a second, and the second one I want to write. We'll have some of the sexy stories. I'll talk about the Australia Day plane crash, the lady in a suitcase, and a couple of other real milestone events that occurred in my career whilst diving. But the last half of it, I really want to target now. Being out for 2 years now, I understand that there's such a hunger and a thirst from first responders on how transitioning works. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of guidance in it. There's some out there, and you can pick and choose it. But I really want to write a little bit about what I was experiencing when I wanted to leave, why I wanted to leave, without bagging the police force out. There was other reasons for it, just work-life balance and all that kind of stuff. What it felt like to officially leave and take that leap, that fucking scary jump from something that was 15 years, and it was the only thing that everyone knew me about. I went to mates' houses, and their dads would be like, "Have you left the police, Luke?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, I thought you'd always be a cop." And I was like, "Thanks, mate. Cheers." It's not giving me much confidence at the moment, but knowing as well that you've got such transferable skills, the weaknesses in armor that we can identify as coppers, the efficiency that we know how to do, the problem solving, the ad hoc decisions, dealing with conflict. I remember getting my job now, and people were getting stressed and upset about certain things, and I'm like, did someone die or is anyone pregnant? Because if that's not the case, then it's all good. Like,
Yeah.
chill out.
Oh.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Oh, I hear you.
I use
So-
different terms. I used as where's the body? Where's the fire?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit? None of this matters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I really want to hone in on that, and now I'm definitely in that stage, and I don't know how this is going to articulate yet, and I'm trying to sort of structure it all out, and it'll probably take me a year, another 2 years to write, but I think it needs to sort of be put into stages, and sort of like, not that it is like this, but sort of like stages of grief, and how you sort of roll through it. And I'm not saying that my situation is the be all and end all. Everyone's going to have different ones, and I even want to try and get different opinions and different people writing in it. But that point that I'm at now is definitely that I'm content. I'm happy with private life. I don't want to go back, but I'm now missing some adrenaline and some stuff. I mean, I just put in for the ADF reserves the other day because I want to do something, something else, and I'm missing that a little bit. So, and I think that's natural. And I think a book like that, with that, will give some people some direction, and not only that, but give family members and loved ones a little bit of an insight to go, this is why they're pretty shitty right now, or this is why they're being quiet, or this is what they're actually after, and this is why they're so jumpy at the moment, kind of thing. So that's what I'm sort of aiming at anyway.
Mate, it's it just, once again, it just sums up how it's so important, because we're all the same. We have these conversations all the time, and they're identical. And like we've said a couple of times in this podcast, we don't know you, mate. We met you just before, but it's like we've known each other forever, because it's the same thing. It's identical.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a very interesting experience. I've been told Schultzy this. I've just come back from Sydney. I was in down there for a wedding, and my mother made the comment, and my wife as well. Both said, did you notice the girls were wearing Doc Martens? That was a wonderful... Yeah, the girls were all glammed up, but that's not how they normally roll. They're at a wedding and they were wearing Doc Martens. And I said, no. I was sitting next to my brother, who's a lieutenant in the infantry. And I won't mention his unit or anything. He's in the army. He's in the infantry. He's an officer. So he was standing next to me, and I said to Mum, no, I didn't notice that. I noticed the two front exits. I noticed that the back door got closed when the bride came in. I did a quick scan of the room, and I noticed that there was no immediate threats within the room. I had a plan to drag you and Dad and the other family out. I prioritised my wife, and then I was coming back. I knew that Maddie would be doing the same thing. And then Maddie Barb went, holy shit, mate, I did the exact same thing. And it's like, that's how we roll. That's how, police, military, very similar, but that's what I'm looking at. And the thing
and
is,
you do that in a moment's notice too.
Yeah.
You do that straight away.
Mate, I was at a church service. I was happy. I'm sitting there, just not at all not consumed with hypervigilance, but hypervigilant enough to know that I had a plan to kill everyone who caused a problem and get everyone out of there who was a victim. And it was like, my brother went, holy shit, you did that as well? I did the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and as soon as I started saying the story, I know that everyone listening can't see what I can see, but both of your heads nodded at the same time. It's a universal experience. You immediately do that. And my mother was aghast. She couldn't believe that at this beautiful wedding, that's what I was thinking. I was like, no, someone's going to think of it. I just look at it like that. It's
and it's not something that consumes you, but it's just at the back of your head. Like even just something simple like driving now. I drive down south or go in the country driving with my wife, and I'm like, if she's driving, I'll just go, watch that kangaroo up ahead. She's like, what kangaroo? And I'm like, the one up ahead there. Can't you see it? And it's just, or we'll drive past something, and I'm like, did you see that? She goes, no, I've been paying attention to the car in front of me. And I'm like, okay. Is that a me thing or a you thing, or is that just because I've been trained to just keep obs on everything throughout my 15 years? And I put it down to that, definitely.
Yeah, it's one of those attention to detail, and you don't lose it. Like, I drive all the time, and I see all the stupid drivers driving around. They've got no operational awareness of driving.
You've been driving in Perth again, have you?
Yeah. Mate, I have a funny story. My dad always taught me when I was learning to drive. He goes, drive as if you're going to run into the worst driver in the world. And he said, you always drive like that. So anyway, I reckon there's a competition going on in Brisbane at the moment.
We're dodging them all.
Well, boys, I've got to take my hat off to Sydney. I just drove right into Sydney, right into the city, and then right back out through the western suburbs and back up north. And I'd never hit a traffic jam, never had a problem. Couldn't believe it. So
That was
hats off
useless,
to the
mate.
Sydney drivers.
Holy
Those are
moly.
useless.
Jeez. Yeah.
So, Luke, we've missed a very critical thing, mate. Plug the book.
Yes.
What's the name of your book?
So the book's called, thank you, yep, Tales of a Diver. So Tales of a Diver, and then the subtitle under it is Profundus Obscurus Sordidus, which is our Latin motto for deep, dark, and dirty within the squad. And yeah, as I said, available on Amazon, and that gets delivered, or in-house publishing as well are selling it. I haven't really gone to the extent of making my own website for it as such. I sell them to people, or send them privately, if they want a signed copy or anything like that. But we're busy doing our own thing, and quite honestly, the Amazon and in-house publishing way is just awesome to be able to shun that off, and they deal with it all and do that kind of thing. So yeah, Tales of a Diver.
Oh, that's
Tales of a Diver. Yeah, so definitely check that out because it's such a unique part of policing that it's really interesting to hear about. So I'll be, don't get me wrong, I'm not going anywhere near the bloody water, but I'm really interested to hear it. I think it'll be a really good read. What I can do is relate to a lot of what you found. I'd be the one going, thanks, Luke. Cheers, mate.
Yeah.
That'd be me. Or I'd send my people, maybe. Maybe I'll send my people to do it. But, but I didn't have many people. But anyway, it's just a really interesting part of it. I love the fact that straight away there was that immediate recognition of just shared experience. It's all there. You sort of, we get each other pretty well. But yeah, mate, I know that you mentioned a couple of things we said that you sort of reached out to us and said, do you mind if we use these things? And it's something that's resonating really well. And I think it's good that you've picked up on it too, was you've already mentioned one in this podcast being that not my tragedy. I didn't coin that. It was told to me by a very old senior copper in the Northern Territory. He's gone, this isn't your tragedy, mate. And it was very early on. He's gone, yeah, this is tragic, but it's not your tragedy. You need to deal with this and you need to move on because you're going to the next one. And the other one was no one was able to describe my PTSD. And I mean, I technically I'm not even diagnosed with it. I don't even have it technically.
Yep.
But it's that twisted ankle version. So it's a spectrum. Yeah. A lot of people would think PTSD, you're triggered by everything, you're suicidal, you're this, you're that. It's like, no, not at all. Not at all. No. I've just got different experiences. And like the reason I sat in that church the other day and looked at everything is because I've been in that threat. I've been in an environment of threat for so long that you're hyper vigilant to the threat towards you. It's not that you're unworkable. It's just you see life differently. And I think you've mentioned that you would like to mention that in the book. And I think that's a good idea because people need to understand that there are little things that will go on in the brain of a loved one who's been in this job. And the military is very similar. Deployed military come back with, not all of them are complete and utterly destroyed by their operational experience. A lot of them will just be slightly damaged by it. And
yeah, definitely.
And it's just something it's just an injury. They'll deal with it. They'll move on. And it becomes part of your life. It's just that I think the mental health on a whole is becoming more and more spoken about. And it's really good that we can speak so honestly about it because no one would judge you for twisting your ankle or breaking your leg. They'd go, you're going to get that treated. Shit, mate, you need to go to the doctor. It's like, well, yeah, if you pull a human body out of a dam, that's a bit out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
So those things need to be dealt with, and it will impact you without you even realizing it. And that's been really good. I think that's a great takeaway from the whole day.
Yeah, no, and obviously, thank you, and that was what initially connected us up. Was I wrote out to you guys to say if that was okay to use those two quotes in the second book, if and when it ever gets published, obviously, and then give you guys a shout out at the same time. But you just reminded me of another podcast I was listening to. Have you guys heard of Adam Blum, the Australian? That's bad.
SAS.
No. He interviews a lot of ex special forces and regiment and defence personnel, but also is reaching out now to first responders. That's bad that I can't remember his True Blue Australian Conversations. I think it is really good podcast. Hosky actually was on his, and then that drew me over to you guys as well.
Oh, right.
And brought that all together. Anyway, there was someone he interviewed and I really appreciated what they said in terms of that whole mental health side of things, because the Defence Force deals with it as much as first responders do. And
Definitely.
yes, that first responder section of the book I want to write, I do want to tack in a little bit of defence, because there's a lot of similarities. We're very different, but there's a lot of similarities at the same
Yeah.
time.
We're all
And
human.
he was talking about, sorry?
We're all human.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And this particular gentleman, I think he was a pilot, flying all the Chinooks and Black Hawks and whatnot. And he was talking about mental health in terms of, it's great that in this day and age we are so open about it, and we're talking about it, and we're breaking that, quote unquote stigma about it. And I think I'm confident in saying it anyway, that we have broken that stigma to 95, 90%, I'd say, whereby, true Aussie blokes, I would say us three are, we've been in the police force for a long time. Someone would say we're quite hardened, and we're happy and comfortable with talking about it. However, the part that he really honed in on, which I thought was really valuable, was the fact that for those kind of roles and those jobs like first responders and defence and whatnot, you're not allowed to then just, I don't think you're allowed to anyway, this is my opinion, is that you can't let it stop you doing the mission there and then as well.
No.
And that's what I think is happening a little bit these days, is we've gone a little bit too far. And this might be a bit of a political thing to say, but gone a little bit too far, whereby we still need some resilience, and we need to be able to deal with the mission, finish it off there and then. And again, that's got to do with it not being your trauma, etc., etc. But afterwards, have a way of dealing with it, have a way of talking about it, whether that is a couple of beers, whether that's going to see someone professionally, going to go just throw a bit of lead around and have some weights, or go to the gym or whatnot. Whatever it is, that's your next step. But we still need to, in those roles, be able to conduct the mission, finish it off, and appropriately and professionally, and then go and deal with that. That's a big thing that I do want to push for.
Mate, I could not agree more. And I think I covered it only recently, the last episode or the one before, I can't remember. But you have to be bloody tough to do this job.
Yeah.
If you start crying when you see Bambi, don't get me wrong, Bambi was a sad story, but guess what? You still got to deal with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you don't have the wherewithal to deal with the situations that you're going to be put in, you don't get to be the victim, like you said beautifully, in the middle of the mission.
Yep.
Sorry, you're not there to be the victim. There is a victim. It's not you. You're there to fix this. You need to take on a very angry person. You need to deal with that. You need to be able to call resources, think rationally, be objective. You need to do all that. You then need to go, all right, I think I've got an injury from this later on down the track. But it's not about victimization. It's about fix the problem. Move on. It's objective to objective, right? The mission now is to fix my mental health so I can get back to doing the mission. That's
life.
Exactly. The mission might be raising my children well and being a good husband. So you need to just be objective based in life. And if you go, right, I need to do this. In order to do that, I need to do this. And it's just, I totally agree. I can't stand that victim mentality. Don't get me wrong. There are genuine people who've seen far too much, and probably because they didn't get their twisted ankle dealt with, and now they've got a broken spine. So identify the problem early, own it, fix it, move on. And I think, like you said beautifully, a lot of knockabout blokes who don't want to sit in a group and go kumbaya. I think the beauty of it is like, no one's saying kumbaya, motherfucker. Fix your shit and get on with it.
That's right.
You're allowed to have your shit. Don't get me wrong. Fix your shit. You've got shit, fix it. But we need you back.
One of the things I always said, it's about recognizing it.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people always said. And I've got a bit of a funny story. When I first left the police, I stayed with a friend of mine because I was moving around a bit, traveling around and all that sort of thing. And she gave me one of the spare rooms for the night. And anyway, she could hear me swearing and cursing, and she thought, oh, fuck, no, fucking geez. I've known this kid since he was like 12, and he's totally fucked up from the police and all that sort of thing. I was watching the Broncos on my earphones, and I was fucking going off the
Oh, the poor woman. She would have heard some terrible. Especially in their.
Imagine what I'd sound like watching the West Coast Eagles at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. No, so Luke, is there anything you thought we'd ask you that we haven't asked you?
No, not really. No. I think I've talked your ear off enough.
Oh, before you go. Yeah, sorry, Schultzy, you go, then I've got a point. You go.
Mate, surely you have committed a cartonable offence
Oh,
somewhere along
we'll
the
get
line.
onto that too, but yeah, definitely, Luke. Yeah.
Yeah.
You go first, Damo, and I'll think for a second.
All right. What I was going to ask you was, can you explain to the listeners at home what Hewitt is? Just explain
Hewitt.
what that is.
So actually, before I do that, I'll talk about the carton.
Excellent.
And one of my good mates will be able to attest to this, and he'll be pissing himself laughing. Now I'm going to say this politically as well because I don't know about the statute of limitations for this one. But I was in South Headland. Me and him working night shift, both in separate cars, both in a Toyota Hilux, and we were driving around the back streets. And by back streets, I mean dirt, gravel roads. 2 a.m, I think it was. He had another partner in his car, and I had another partner in mine. And we just used to play this thing around town in the middle of the night where if it was 2 cars, you'd sort of, without actually touching each other's car, you'd play tag and you'd go into the bush somewhere, you'd take off, your mate would take off behind you, and you'd try and keep up with them. I don't know. It was just stupid fun that we would do in the middle of the night when nothing was going on. Anyway, I went to the this infamous sort of area, and I've taken off. He's behind me. I've seen his headlights, and slowly they just started dimming away because I was like, beautiful. I've just kicked up this massive red dust cloud. There's no chance in hell he's going to find me. And would you believe it? A big black dog just jumped out and ran in front of my car. So I had to turn really, really quickly. And I've taken this, Toyota Hilux that had probably done about 17,000 Ks at that point, and I took a little tumble with it and did about 3 rolls. I've written this car off, and my mate behind me, he's rolled up about half a minute behind me, and he's pulled up, and I can still remember sitting on the side of my on my seat because the passenger side was down. Everyone was okay, no one was injured. I was sitting in the driver's seat still, and he jumped up on the side of the car. My window was down. He's looked in. He's like, "Macca, you all right?" And I just calmly put the car into park, even though it was on its passenger side door. I just proceeded with, "Yeah, mate, I think I'm good. Can you get my partner out?" And that was a probationer who had been in the job for about 2 weeks, and I just done that to them. So, welcome to the job.
That's a carton, Mike.
It is definitely a carton.
And the best part, he's now TRG. I've gone to divers. We're still best mates. He was a groomsman at my wedding. About 3 years into my time at the dive squad, I get this package in the internal mail, and there was something hard in it. And I've gone, what the fuck's this? And I open it up. It's from him. I've opened it, and it's the wing mirror of the car that he kept for that amount of time. And he'd sent it to me with this handwritten letter about, like, mate, this is the funniest night of my life. I can't believe you put the car into park, even though it was on its left-hand side. So I'll cop that one.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
That is.
And I did get a careless driving ticket for that one. $100.
And paid it straight away, I bet.
I did. It wasn't a gazetted road, so I don't think it was right, but I paid it anyway.
Well, on that note, yeah, that is outstanding.
So I'll pay that one. If you guys come over, I'll put a carton on for sure.
Yeah.
Well, mate, I'm just looking at your beer fridge behind you. I think there's more than a carton there.
Well, yeah,
definitely. That's always stocked. And Hewitt. So Hewitt stands for Helicopter Underwater Escape Training.
Tell me more about that, Luke. Just briefly.
Yeah. So that is my job now. So I left the police force. I went and worked for the NDIS very, very quickly. I think I lasted 3 or 4 months before I wasn't a big fan of that office-based kind of work. And a friend had recommended this job to me, which was helicopter underwater escape training. So all the oil and gas workers, RFDS have to do it. A lot of other pilots within helicopters. And essentially it's training on how to escape a helicopter that crashes into the water. So I had a good skill set for that in terms of being in the water, being quite comfortable in the water, especially on dive gear. And the training side of it, I think, coppers naturally move into training and assessing quite well and quite easily, being able to talk to people. Again, I had that sort of negotiator's background as well to comfortably talk. And I settled into that as a role now. So yeah, I teach oil and gas workers on how to get out of a helicopter if they were to ever crash into a water. So we've got a big pool out here in Jandakot. I work for a company called ERGT, and yeah, so I have fun with that nowadays. It's a Monday to Friday job. I get the weekends off. When I leave work, my phone doesn't ring, and it's quite comfortable. That's for sure.
And I, as a fellow trainer and assessor, I can completely agree. It's a very good change of pace. But I tell you what you can do with your Hewitt, Luke. You can shove that directly up your ass. And on that note, I think, yeah, anything to add, Schultzy?
Yeah, well, mate, I was just thinking when you spoke about that, you said that a couple of times. Honestly, mate, when you've been underwater that many times, I could go to sleep underwater quite comfortably. It just becomes.
Mate, I would go asleep underwater once, and then Luke would
sleep forever.
So, yeah.
Read the book. There was a training run that I did where I nearly fell asleep underwater. You'll read about that. It's a good fun, good funny story.
Yeah, people find it very hard to believe, but when you've been doing it that long, you just feel that comfortable.
Yeah,
and you just it becomes like a second home.
And when you're breathing as well, and you're just hearing that, it's just it's like Darth Vader just whispering in your ear, mate.
Yeah, no, I live in Siberia, but anyway, that's just me. Yeah. What am I talking about? I pretty well do live in Siberia, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure, Luke. We're really glad we got you on, mate. It's been excellent, and what I think we've loved about it too is there's so much familiarity, and yet obviously you blokes have got your shared experience with the diving and with that underwater thing, but there's just so much that's a very niche part of policing, so it's been really good talking about that. What do you got to add, Schultzy? Anything before we cut it loose?
Mate, no, I don't think so, mate. But Luke, stay on, mate, once we stop recording, because I'm sure we've got one or two yarns left to go.
Yeah. No, definitely. And thank you guys, and an awesome job with what you're doing. Just like I said at the very, very start, humanizing it, and I think even non-cops are probably getting a lot from this. You guys are obviously getting feedback, but I think it's very, very valuable what you're doing. So it's good.
Yeah, thanks,
Appreciate it, mate. Well, that's us, Schultzy. We're done again.
It is.
We'll be back next week. And obviously, we've had a bit of fun with Luke there, but we haven't looked in the last that there is an ongoing operation in Victoria. Our thoughts are down there, and we'll have a chat about that in the future.
Yep, definitely will. All right. We'll see you next time.